This is a true story, folks. As much as I'd like to be a writer, I am not one. Anyways, I've scrolled through the sub 100 times thinking to myself, has anything happened to me that I could post? Like I'm sure we all have. It wasn't until last week I started thinking about posting my dad's story here. Now, if this is not the correct sub, I'd like to know because my father's the best person I know. And I want to share his story one way or another. Spring 2014 was a slow season for my father's business. The weather was nice and the roads were clear, which means slow shifts at an auto shop. It was mid-April, around 4 p.m. The wind was pulling a nice spring breeze when my dad, Bill, was walking along the side of his shop. It happened to overlook a small stream and running trail, which he enjoyed gazing at near the end of his shift. The side of his building ran along the top of a steep hill, which turned into a path. He heard a ruffling in the wind, and about halfway down the hill, he sees a big blue tarp. Being very proud of his business and its appearance, he started to climb down the hill. He was just about to grab for it about 15 feet away to toss it in the dump when he saw a car pull into the lot. He turned around and went to help his customer. When 5:30 p.m. rolls around, he closes up and goes home, forgetting about the tarp. The next morning, Bill is sitting in his office when 3 policemen come in. They asked my father and coworkers a bunch of questions about any suspicious behavior they might have seen. Side note, my dad is extremely charismatic and friendly. He oftentimes talks people into sharing information with him that they really shouldn't. He looks like someone you can trust. And he can. And he seemed to always have the insider details about things like this. He used his humor to make people feel comfortable, which helped getting strangers to open up to him. Anyway, so Bill and his coworker Hank are talking with a female police officer when she lets it slip that a body has been discovered just down the hill. Oh crap, I was down there yesterday cleaning and I didn't see anybody though, Bill said. Around what time did you happen to see the large blue and white tarp while you were cleaning the area? She said intensely. Actually, yeah, I almost grabbed it yesterday but ended up getting distracted. She asks him more questions about what time, what he saw, etc. when he asked her if the body was found in the tarp. Yes, it was. A woman jogging found it this morning around 10:30 a.m. My dad was floored. He was just there yesterday. After a few more questions, the police all head to the crime scene to finish the initial investigation. No one was allowed on the scene, and the police were asking the passerbys not to take any pictures. Luckily for you guys, my dad took one from his office window. This is what it looked like. You can see near the top of the picture the running trail. Just in front of that is part of the creek that has dried up. There are the officers and such searching for whatever they were searching for. You can also see just left of the officer in black a teeny shade of blue, what would be the tarp. Flash forward a few days. The police went back to my father's shop. They noticed the security cameras were set up around the building, and they were hoping that they might catch something on the tape. While transferring the data over, my dad started asking more questions about the murder. He learned it was a middle-aged man that had been stabbed. Not too much to go on, as it seemed. Hey, you know there are a couple of meth heads that live in this shack behind our shop. It's connected to that bar. Bill started talking about his own predictions for whodunit scenarios. He continued, yeah, we have a lot of problems with them, stealing scrap metal from the back, letting their dogs run wild. Even had him threaten to shoot me once when I was spraying their dogs with water so they would quit barking. You should check them out. The officer nodded, gathered the rest of his things and left. Hey Hank, let's go down there, see if we can find anything cool, my father had whispered to his coworker. Alright, I guess it couldn't do any harm, Hank replied hesitantly. They started down the hill where the trench was found. The grass was flat and the tarp was now gone. They walked around for 15 or so minutes. When Bill headed up the stream a little ways, the trail runs under a main road and leads to a man-made lake. Just under the bridge, the water starts to get heavier and the trees are a bit thicker. He noticed a red Lowe's cart must have ran into one of the trees. I'm taking that in for the shop, he thought, as he ran over to pull it out of the stream, calling over for Hank to help. The two of them pull it out and start wheeling it back to the hill. Suddenly, my dad stops. He sees something in the cart. What is that rusty looking stuff? Hank, stop. Look at the cart. Is that blood? They looked closer, and sure enough, blood. It was all over the cart, on the wheels and to the side. But it wasn't only blood they started to notice. Hair. Human hair. Utterly stunned, my dad calls the policewoman he had been talking to the previous days and explained what they found. For whatever reason, the police department was very skeptical that this was evidence at first. They didn't believe my father. When he told them it made no sense to make up, they sent out a car. There were 2 police officers and a CSI. The CSI asked my dad why he thought this was blood. Because it looks like blood, sir? I'm not sure. How do you know that is human hair? The CSI asked. Because it looks like human hair. My dad snapped sarcastically. Why did he seem so hesitant? They used a chemical test, and sure enough, it tested positive for human blood. They took the card as evidence and thanked my dad. Again, my dad tried to give his opinion who the mystery killer might be. He suggested again that they talk with the crazy neighbors behind the auto shop. Still, no information was taken down, and they left with what they had. 2 more days pass. My dad is leaving the shop to get some things from Costco. There's a small dirt alley that leads to the main road just behind his work. In the past, it had been blocked by one of the drug addicts' car. They were complaining to my dad and his boss about the business driving cars back and forth through the alley, disrupting them. He notices it's open and decides to take the shortcut to his destination. But something was off. He saw the usual blocked car sitting in front of the shack. The door was wide open, and there was someone on their knees with their upper body inside the car. He got in his car and crept up just a little so he could see what was happening. He right away recognized the skinny red-headed female as the female that lived in the shack. It was a druggy guy's wife or girlfriend. He didn't know exactly. She was on her hands and knees, surrounded by hard cleaning chemicals such as bleach and OxyClean and much more. My dad had said he knew right then that they were guilty. For one, why would someone be scrubbing their car with straight chemicals? No water, no rinsing. It was the middle of the day on a hot June afternoon. Second, they happened to be only 2 blocks away from a local car wash. He said it felt off, and he knew to trust his instincts. She just kept scrubbing and scrubbing the passenger side floor. He pulled out his phone and started recording her. Now, he's known this woman and her husband or boyfriend for years now. Like I said, they complained about my father's workers, and he complained about their dogs on and off for a while. It was all harmless bickering. My dad, always trying to be the funny guy, yells out his window as he's driving past. Covering up a murder? He laughed and drove off, hearing her say F you as he drove off. This time, when he called the police, they took it very seriously. He explained that she was cleaning the car aggressively, in that it seemed like she was trying to bleach something out of the car. The next day, the cops went by to talk with the residents of the shack. The day after that, they made an arrest. After searching the shack, they found large blood stains soaked into the plywood floor. Once the blood was seen, the wife/girlfriend crumbled and told the police everything. It was her and her husband or boyfriend, and the victim, who was named Rich. He had gone over to their little house to get some drugs. Someone ended up accusing Rich of putting some of the stuff aside for himself, and things got a little heated. Eventually, the husband started to physically fight with Rich. When he stabbed him, he bled out on the floor and died. They did not know what to do, so they stole the Lowe's cart to move him around, loaded him into the car, wrapped him in the tarp, and pushed his body down the hill. They ditched the cart, thinking the river would wash it down far enough that it wouldn't be found. My dad and Hank sat in their car while they watched the police arrest Don, the suspected murderer. He took a video of that as well. You can hear my dad very inappropriately yelling out of his window, "Haha, killer," in the video. Both videos were lost when he switched phones. My dad says he's going to start a private investigation business. Yeah, right, because he solved a murder all on his own, Anyways, thanks for reading, guys. Edit. First big post. So some formatting changes. Link fixes. Also must have forgotten to finish the title. Edit 2. Whoa. Okay. That was a lot of responses and comments. I'm trying to reply to everyone, but it is hard. Also, some things. Yes, I actually was off in regards to the timeline. It seems in other reports that I didn't see yet showed more detailed dating. Believe it was late June when he was sentenced and everything. My father was a part of the case from start to finish, including the trial, where he was asked to testify and give a statement about how he found the Lowe's cart. Also, some of you were offended by his jokes towards the couple who lived in the shack. I did expect that, so I do apologize on his behalf if it seems like he didn't care about the seriousness of the case. Trust me, he did. He is a very professional person when needed to be. And like I said, he was just trying to be a funny guy, but also consider that she was covering up a murder. So maybe instead of defending her feelings, just cut my old man some slack. Thanks again for reading. I recently replied to a post on Ask Reddit about scariest experiences, and after reading what I had to say, a couple of people suggested I post it here. So here I am. A week or so before my 10th birthday, I walked to the corner store with a $5 bill and picked up a jar of ragu for my mom. On my way home, a man I had never seen before fell in step with me and began talking. "Hi," he said cheerfully. "My name is Dr. Ramsey, and I'm a pediatrician. Do you know what a pediatrician is?" I walked along silently, not replying, and fervently hoping he would take that as a sign he should leave me alone. Subtleties were not his strong suit, though, because he kept right along chattering. "Are your parents looking for a pediatrician for you? Of course, you're almost a big girl now. You'll be needing another kind of doctor soon, won't you? That's okay, though. They can bring you to me. Until then, anyways, what's your name? You have beautiful hair." I was just on my way to get some suckers for the candy jar in my office. Do you like suckers? Thankfully, we were nearing my house, so I ran forward and up the back steps and in through the kitchen door. I didn't know it then, but that was the beginning of a very long, very scary ordeal. It didn't take long after that for Dr. Ramsey to begin showing up. At first, it seemed benign enough, at least to a kid. He would drive by nearly every day, smiling and waving. I told my mom, who said maybe it was on his way home from work. But then, the phone calls began. My dad called me into the living room and sat me down. He asked about the day Dr. Ramsey followed me home, and asked if I talked to him. He said I wasn't going to be in trouble, but that I needed to tell him the truth. I told him no, and he asked if I was sure, and if I could be forgetting something. I told him no again, and he frowned, then asked, "Then how does he know your name?" I didn't know how he learned it. It turns out that was not all he knew. He knew my sister's name as well. Pretty soon, neither my sister or I were allowed to answer the phone. He called us several times a day. At first, neither of us knew what he was saying. Then, one night, one of my brothers told us he was telling my parents that he was going to hurt me, and later, my sister. Things got complicated after that. My dad had called the police, but as this was before there were any stalking laws, there was not a lot they could do. They told my parents to call back if he, quote, tried anything. My dad then called a friend of his from back in the day who happened to be a cop. For the next month, my dad's friend escorted me to and from school. Suddenly, life as I knew it became screeching to a halt. I couldn't walk to school alone. I couldn't play outside. I couldn't walk to Super America, sort of like a 7-Eleven for those who don't know. When access to me was completely denied, things escalated. It was around this time he began threatening my sister as well. Then, one afternoon, my sister, two of my brothers, my mom, and I were in the kitchen. One of my brothers saw a glimpse of someone in the garage, and the person in the garage had seen them too. Dr. Ramsey came bolting out of the garage, my brothers chasing after him. They ran all the way to Cherokee Park, where he lost them in the trees. My parents called the police again, but nothing came out of it. The only information they had was a description and a name that was almost certainly fake. A couple weeks later, we woke to find our dog hanging from the outside porch. He was a glorious saddleback German Shepherd, born the same day I was. We were all devastated. The cops said there was no evidence it was him and ruled it accidental, but none of us believed that. His phone calls became more informative in the meantime. He would talk about who was home and who wasn't. If my brother would say my dad was home, he would tell him who was really in the house. He also would talk about the house itself, about the window in the kitchen. He could easily open with a knife from the outside, even when it was locked. And about the French doors that connected the living room to the side porch, and how the lock could be finagled from the outside if you jiggled it just right. That night, my dad put some carpenter nails at the bottom of the French doors until he could get a new lock ordered. My parents had to go to a company event for my dad's work. My older brothers were at Saints West roller skating rink. My sister was on the phone with our best friend. My little brother was on the floor asleep. I was watching Devo on the midnight special with Wolfman Jack. It was late. Suddenly, the top of the French door swung inward. In the few milliseconds before the nails in the bottom caused them to snap back, I could see his silhouette. Dr. Ramsey. My sister whipped the phone at the television, and we ran up the stairs. About halfway up, we realized our little brother was asleep in the living room. As quietly as we could, we stepped back down the stairs to get him. We all went into our bedroom and didn't turn on the light. This way, we could see outside. We watched out the window for a while, and when we didn't find him, we crept down the hall to our brother's room to look. We looked down and could see someone standing at the back door. He knocked loudly. "What do you want?" my sister asked out of the window. He stepped back and said, "Is this the Mercy residence? I have a pizza for delivery. Can you come to the door?" She scoffed at him, declaring she was not stupid. She could see he didn't have a pizza, and she was calling the cops. He then left. A short while later, my brothers returned home. We told them what happened, and they walked around the yard, watching for him. They came back in, and things settled down. By now, we'd pretty much given up on calling the cops because it never helped, so we just went back in, each of us, except my youngest brother, still asleep, carrying a knife from the kitchen, just in case. Eventually, one of my brothers went back into the kitchen to get a bowl of cereal as a snack. You know that sensation you get when you can just feel someone watching you? Yeah, he had it. He kept looking around the kitchen, through the doorway, into the dining room, at the windows. He didn't see anything, but he could feel eyes on him, so he went closer to the door to try see better. The kitchen lights were reflecting on the windows of the door, so he couldn't see. Our door has 3 rows of 3 windows. He stepped closer, then closer again, until he was right up to the door, then cupped his hands on either side of his head so he could see. There on the other side of the window was Dr. Ramsey, smiling back at him. He turned to yell for my older brothers, and when he looked back again, he was gone. They went out again to look for him, but couldn't find him. The next night, we were at the table playing Crazy Eights, and my brother was restless. My sister asked him what's wrong, and he said he always felt like any minute now there would be a boom 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 on the door or window. Almost immediately after he finished that sentence, boom 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 on the window right behind him. In the chaos, the 2 eldest ran out, but he was already gone like always. A couple of weeks later, I was at school, and we were outside on the playground during recess. I was swinging upside down when I saw that now familiar blue Ford Galaxy cruising by, moving slowly. There he was, smiling and waving. He called my name, and I ran to the teacher and told her. The school had been told all about him, and she took me inside right away and called my mom. That same day, my mom had gotten a call from the school office asking her to verify that my dad was picking me up, as he'd called to say he was on his way. He wasn't. Not long after that, I woke up one night, thirsty. I went down to the kitchen for a drink, and there, sitting alone in the dark, was my dad. On the table, a gun. He was tired of the police waiting until Dr. Ramsey tried something. He was tired of his children being terrorized. He was tired of being afraid every time he left for work that something would happen to us while he was gone. I sat with him for a bit, watching, before he sent me back to bed. These events and many more took place over a period of around 18 months. Then, as suddenly as it began, it was all over. He had vanished from our lives. The phone calls, the drive-by with the creepy waves, everything. For a long time, during and after the Dr. Ramsey days, I would have reoccurring nightmares, in which I would wake up to him standing over me as I slept. It took a long time before I felt like a kid again. I found out years later that when Dr. Ramsey was calling, he would tell my parents that he was going to kill me and later my sister, and that there was nothing they could do about it. I don't know what happened to him when he disappeared. I don't know if it was a car wreck, locked in prison, a coma, but sometimes I wonder if the wait ended for my dad when he was sitting in the darkened kitchen one night. I don't know, and I'm not sure I want to know, and that is my story. I love to ride my bike along country roads. Not far from where I live is a tiny town called Three Oaks in Michigan. One Saturday, my wife was working, and I had nothing to do, so I strapped my bike to my car and drove the hour to Three Oaks. I parked in the scenic downtown area, and then rode out of the town and into the surrounding countryside. As I wound my way farther into the remote countryside, houses and businesses and cars grew increasingly scarce. Eventually, there were only an occasional house or two every half mile or mile, and cornfields and small woods flanking the dark and gravel roads that I pedaled down. It's on one of these back roads that a minivan drove past me. Within moments of passing, it turned around and pulled up alongside me. I looked over, and the passenger, a woman in her late 20s, was looking at me with her window down. The driver, a man of seemingly the same age, leaned over the passenger and said to me in a slight southern accent and with a big smile on his face, "Hey, do you know David Crest?" I thought for a brief second, but I don't know any David Crest, so I said no. The driver said, "You don't know of him at all?" I said I didn't and apologized, and then pedaled on. The van sat there for a moment longer, and then pulled a U-turn and drove off in the direction it was originally heading. I thought nothing of the encounter. Maybe the driver was a friend of David Christ, and he thought we had met through David or something. I don't know. At the time, I didn't think I had any reason to worry. I continue on my ride, turning down this road and heading north, and then turning down that road and heading east. I didn't have any agenda. I was just out to enjoy the summer day and to meander through the relaxing countryside. Maybe 10 minutes later, and on an entirely new road and heading in an entirely different direction from the one I had first met the van, I saw the van again. We were heading towards each other, and I gave a smile and nod as I passed the driver. I remember thinking it was an odd coincidence that I would come across this van again. The driver stared as he passed, and he had a big smile on his face. At this point, I began wondering what they were doing. They might be lost and looking for this David Crest guy, or maybe they're just enjoying a scenic drive and thought I looked like a friend of a friend or something. I don't know, but at that point, I was starting to think about the situation a bit more critically. I continued taking a twisting, turning, meandering path, taking this road, and then turning onto that, heading north, southwest, east. I come across the van again. They're heading my direction, and I pulled across-side them. The driver rolled down his window and leaned out. He was a late 20s white man with a few inches of a goatee and a baseball cap. He had a large smile plastered across his face. I stopped my bike and looked at him, waiting for him to say something. He just looked at me for a good 30 seconds. Now, 30 seconds doesn't sound like a long time, but you go flag down a stranger and then just look at them for 30 seconds, and you'll realize that in that kind of situation, 30 seconds is a lifetime. Finally, he spoke and said, "Hey, do you know David Crest?" Same damn question. This time, there was no smile on his face. He stared at me, and I was thinking to myself, is he joking? Does he not remember he asked me the same question 20 minutes ago? Is he just being funny? Is he intoxicated? After a moment, I told him that I still don't know anybody by the name David Crest, and I pedaled off down the road. It's at that point that I realized exactly in how remote of an area I was. I peered down the road I was on, and I didn't see a house on this entire street. I was flanked by a cornfield on one side and a forest on the other. I looked over my shoulder and saw the van slowly driving down the road from me. It could have not been a coincidence that I came across this van 3 times in a row now, even though I was taking random roads, heading different directions, and it just made no sense why anyone driving would take the same maze of roads as me. The only thing they could have been doing was just driving around, maybe a joyride, but why would they stop me and ask me the same question twice? It was quite strange, and I was beginning to become a little concerned. I decided to begin to head back toward the town center. I pedaled really hard, and the gravel road ahead of me continued to bend to the right and onto a dirt path. I wouldn't really consider it a road or street. As I neared towards it, who should come around the bend but that damn van? I gripped my pocket knife, which I always take on my rides like this, just in case, and then realized all they would have to do is run me down with the van, and I would be in serious trouble. As the van drew closer, I was ready to jump off and run into the cornfields. The van slowed down as it approached me, and the driver rolled his window down and leaned out again, but this time I didn't stop riding. I increased my speed, even though I knew I could never outrun the van if they gave chase. I looked over my shoulder and saw the van sitting there in the middle of the road. I then went back to the fork I was at earlier and continued on the gravel road until I could no longer see the van behind the corn rows, and then I stopped. I got off my bike and crept along the cornfield until I was at its edge, and then I peeked down the road I had just been on. The van was in the distance driving away from me. I ran back to my bike, and as soon as the van was entirely out of sight, I turned around and took the left fork along the dirt path. I rode as fast as I could, knowing that if the people in the van had nefarious things in mind, and if they caught me on this dirt path flaked by cornfields and far from an area that anyone would come across us, that I would be in danger and sort of cornered. My ruse worked, or perhaps the van was never after me at all, and I made it the rest of the way to the town center without seeing them again. When I got home later that day, I was still replaying the events in my head, and the name David Crest kept creeping through my mind. Was David Crest someone famous, I wondered? Like a musician? Should I have known David Crest? I decided to Google the name. I tried a couple of different spellings for Crest, then I found the terrifying result. I came across a newspaper article from somewhere in Tennessee. The article explained how a man named David Crest had turned himself in after stabbing another man at a gas station in 2013. The article included a photo of this criminal David Crest, and I believe it was the same man that was driving the van. He had a baseball cap and a few inches of a goatee goatee, and the man in the van was a dead ringer for David Crest in the article. I did an inmate search of the place in Tennessee in one of the country prisons, and there was no David Crest in that inmate population. Somehow, David Crest had gotten out of prison, or maybe he was never convicted, as I couldn't find any articles about sentencing. In less than 2 years after stabbing a guy, for some reason, he had made his way to Michigan. Why was he driving along these back roads? Who was the woman in the passenger seat? And why the hell did he keep asking if I knew of him? Do I know David Crest? Yes, I do now.